The Kalb Report is funded by a grant from the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation. From the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., this is the Kalb Report with Marvin Kalb.
Hello, and welcome to the National Press Club and to another edition of the Kalb Report. I'm Marvin Kalb, and our subject tonight, Diane Sawyer, A Life in News. I don't remember the exact day, but about 35 or 40 years ago, a very bright young woman, a graduate of Wellesley College, I believe, walked into the CBS newsroom in Washington. Everyone looked up and realized instinctively that someone special had just entered, someone likely to be on a very fast track, as indeed she has been. ABC News has kindly provided us with a brief promotional film about Diane's career, so let's take a look.
For more than 3 decades, Diane Sawyer has been one of the most respected and passionate journalists on television, known for hard-hitting investigative reports and exclusive interviews with world leaders and newsmakers from Wall Street to Hollywood. As anchor of Good Morning America, the ABC News magazines, and now World News, Diane has shown viewers that there is nothing in the world of TV news she cannot do.
Some of the claims made by the Americans have turned into a tasteless joke.
Would you like to see this document? Is it a joke?
Her career began in 1968 when the literature graduate decided to take an unlikely turn as weather girl at WLKY-TV in her hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. She practiced shooting with a camera herself and learned reporting. She next went to Washington and the Nixon White House to work in and observe a presidency firsthand, staying on to help Nixon write his memoirs after his resignation. In 1978, she returned to TV news at CBS, and in 1984 made history by becoming the first woman on the formidable news magazine 60 Minutes.
I'm Diane Sawyer. Those stories and Andy Rooney tonight on 60 Minutes.
In 1989, she joined ABC News to create an innovative new magazine program, Primetime Live, with Sam Donaldson. Every week, she traveled the world and interviewed newsmakers, once even arguing her way into the office of Russian President Boris Yeltsin, where he was holed up against the tanks and guns of an erstwhile coup. Through the years, she has led award-winning investigations into racism, fraud, and the care of the vulnerable. Her report on families in poverty in Camden, New Jersey, earned her many awards.
They search for someone to help them, just a few $100s, but the church is poor. No money can be found.
I want my own room, and I'm never going to get it.
I'm Diane Sawyer from Louisville, Kentucky, the new kid on the block.
In 1999, she added another job, rising at dawn, joining Charlie Gibson at the helm of Good Morning America, bringing Americans that full morning spectrum of news, information, and of course, the smiles. 2 years later, she and Charlie would watch and report on the horror of September 11th as it played out live.
This is not just another story, even for reporters who've been trained to do this for so long.
And Diane would soon make her way down to ground zero.
It is a truly eerie scene because
in December 2009, after 11 years, she moved on from Good Morning America and became anchor of World News.
Good evening, and it is so good to be here with you tonight.
And as always, she has her bags packed for the big story.
All around this city, people asking, when will the help arrive? So every place is brown. Is oil impacted?
Yes.
I've covered a lot of disasters around the world, and I have never seen this perfect storm of quake, tsunami, and nuclear fears.
She has won every award, Peabody's, DuPont's, Emmys. But most of all, she has earned the respect of her viewers, who know if they want a tough question for a dictator...
Have you ever personally killed someone who opposed you?
Or the kind of reporting that fights to help others, or maybe just a sense of wonder for the news of day, they can turn on the television and Diane will be there every night.
Diane, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Kalb Report, especially tonight as we open this conference of the International Women's Media Foundation, many of whose members are in the audience, eager to hear about your career and your take on the news business, which remains troubled these days, as we know, but also remains indispensable to the functioning of a free society. So let's begin. You're clearly at the top of your career. You're the anchor, world news, etc. I know that first and foremost, you consider yourself a journalist, but you're also an anchor, and in the world of television news, being an anchor is something very special. So describe for us what's so special about being an anchor.
Well, first of all, I have to say it's very special just to be sitting here with you, and I want to say something. Oh, you have to hear this. You have to hear this, because if you remember when I first walked into CBS News, all I remember is when I was sent to cover the State Department with Marvin Kalb. And I came in and secretaries of state were calling you, and I couldn't get a phone call returned from an answering machine for the Costa Rican desk. There was nothing I did. So for me, this is a true pinnacle. This is a kind of dream to be back home with you. Okay, now, hijacking your interview, is that what you're worried about? You know, to be an anchor really is, in my view, is to try as much as possible to be the 360-degree radar of the day, of the morning, of the question, the driving question that has to take you through a broadcast. And it is such a gift to be able to throw to incredible correspondents like Jim Shuto, sitting out here in Iran, moving through the streets of Iran with his small camera in such danger. It is such a gift to be able to report the stories that some of the women I know you have here in the conference report with such incredible bravery. So it just seems to me that to be an anchor is to be a witness to the world in its varying questions, in the way it presents itself in terms of priorities during the day. It's to get a chance to make decisions that you hope at home somebody will look up and say a couple of things. I didn't know that, which Don Hewitt of 60 Minutes always taught me is the single first and most wonderful question. And then the second thing is, this has helped me live my life. Now I understand. This wakes me up. It wakes me up to the world. And if anything at all, I see the job of an anchor is to say, how do we wake up ourselves, our questions, and our reporting today?
So in waking up the world, what do you see as your own special responsibilities when you arrive in the office? What is it that you're looking for?
I'm persistent. I have strong opinions. I think really the job, in a way, is to have opinions that can excite a conversation. I don't make the decisions, all of the decisions. We are very much, as you know, a collegial operation. John Banner is the executive producer. We are a group of people sitting around a rim every day, talking to the correspondents in the field. And I only think that my job is sometimes to try to be as fearless as I can be in saying, let's do this. Let's try this. Heaven knows I'm old. And what have I got to lose? Let's do something fearless today. Let's try something today.
Has a general called you at a certain point, or a president, and said, hey, Diane, I know that you guys are about to run story X. Please don't do that. What would your response be? Has that ever happened to you?
It has never happened to me. I know that it happens in the capacity at World News. And Charlie has told me in the past about the dilemma. I do think that everyone is a careful decision weighed heavily with our dual responsibilities, not to put lives at risk at the same time, to stay true to our contract with the American people that we tell you what we know.
You probably know that according to the Pew Research Center, more Americans under the age of 30, and a lot of the people in our audience here, get their news from the internet, not from television news. So how do you as an anchor adjust to this new reality? What is it that you do, and how do you play the game?
Well, we're on Twitter. We are at World News. I am not on Twitter at World News, but I am on Facebook. And I think it's the most exciting vitality during the day to see all the different ways, and we can see it right at World News. We can see all the different conversations going on at once. And so at the same time that we're getting ready to put a piece on the air, or I interviewed Secretary Clinton today, at the same time we're getting ready to do that, we're taking a picture. The picture's going out, and we're saying something about what's happening at that moment. I also think it's a great opportunity to take people behind the scenes and often to hear that. I cannot tell you how often we hear from Facebook or something coming in to the World News tweets, a question that you say, of course that's a question. Of course that's what everyone wanted to know. So the giant cacophony, the giant democracy, the giant chorus that is the country can sometimes just reach right through to you at the moment you need it most.
So do you see the new world of the internet as your major competition at this point, or is it still CBS and NBC?
I don't think it's it's still you. I'm going to go back to the State Department and see if I can get a Secretary of State to return my call. No, I don't see it as a competition with the internet.
You do
I really do not. I don't. I think that if we don't figure out what we do uniquely, then that is the forum of ideas.
Well,
we have to be out there creating a unique and important conversation, answering questions in a unique and important way so that you also want to come to us.
And I do notice that you do carry on a conversation with the audience as opposed to the old days when we would broadcast to the audience. No, so now is that deliberate on your part?
No, that's just me. First of all, I don't have one of those voices.
Oh, yes, you do.
Oh, no, I don't. I said to Charlie, when Charlie would do what we call the headlines, the opening of the show, tonight on World News, and I go, I can't do that. I can only just go tonight on World News. And I always wish I had one of those, but I just don't have it. So some of that is just a function of the physiology of the vocal cords.
I think also what I'm trying to get at is how do you as an anchor make World News, and this is the same, by the way, for Katie Couric at CBS or Brian Williams at NBC, but how do you persuade so many people who are now absorbed in the new world of information and communication not to perceive you as a relic of the past, but rather to see you
a relic of the past?
No, I mean the program, not you.
There was a gesture my way.
No,
I saw that emerging from my archaeological dig. Let me tackle that question. I think by breaking some of the conventions and the formulas, we are still in the moment when the news is breaking and you come to broadcast television, and we are as immediate and alive as how the story feels and tastes and smells. When you are there with us, we don't have to make an argument.
That's a good point. That's a good point. You've recently come back from a trip to Japan. And we're now here in Washington talking as we tape this, but you were there to cover another extraordinary story overseas, and you've done a lot of that. What I'm trying to understand is, in a way, why did you make that trip? And if your answer be because it was a great story, it's not enough. Why do you make the trip?
I wish I could say that it was a science and a theory. It's not. A lot of it is I feel impelled to go. It's not just that I covered the tsunami in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, but I felt that that was a story I had to experience tangibly and to see. And this, as we said, this incredible constellation of disasters. And I felt at the time, at that moment too, that there was a reason for the entire broadcast to be there. And part of being an anchor, as you know, is a decision about where are you best there anchoring. And isn't it Don Hewitt of 60 Minutes who also coined the term anchor from the relay race, the anchor of a relay race who hands it off. And when are you best there, simply a center of the axis of great people, and when is it best for you to take the whole broadcast and go overseas? Because it does change that balance. In the Middle East, for instance, Christian Amanpour was there, Jim was there, there were a host of correspondents who were there and who were fantastic.
They were indeed.
And I was here for that, and I was here as the story moved from Tunisia to Egypt, and we followed it straight through. So it's a case-by-case decision, but it's so much about the entire broadcast going.
Tell me about the, if you can, about the cuts that are taking place at networks these days. At ABC, to the best of my knowledge, in the year 2010, there was a 25% cut in staff. Did people have to be cut from World News?
Yes, everyone.
Really?
Everyone was involved.
How many people are on the staff at World News?
We have, Kathy, where are you? I'm thinking that we have close to 100, 80 to 100 at any given time. We have freelance people coming in, freelance editors coming in as well.
And people had to be
too.
cut from that number?
We did have to cut from that number, and you know, it was anguishing for everybody there, everybody at every part of the network.
Did the program itself lose money in its annual budget?
I do not know.
I don't do the
budget.
You don't do budgets?
No.
You don't do
money?
budgets.
I never have. I've never done that. I've never asked how much it costs to go to Japan. I don't want to know.
Okay.
It's not my problem. It's not my problem. You have to talk me out of it.
But this you would probably know, and that is, do the cuts in staff at a certain point in the day as you're looking around and hoping you could get Joe to go here and Mary to go there, but you may not have Joe and Mary anymore because they're cut. Does it affect the quality of what it is that you are giving to the American people?
I think sometimes initially, for sure, it has and does affect our exhaustion and our tension and our feeling, oh, Joe and Mary did this. Joe and Mary did this. How are we going to do this in a new way? But, and this is in no way to say that it was not a true heartbreak for everyone whose colleagues left. Our responsibility is to look at what we're doing and to say, are we deploying our resources on what we really believe the future to be? And to sharpen and hone those within it. And you know, I always look back, gosh, I can't believe this. One of the first stories I ever did was in Africa, and I went out and I remembered I was with the Maasai, and I was out way in the middle of the night in the desert on some story. Oh, I know, it was Richard Leakey. And we were going out and exploring lots of archaeological digs again. And I looked up, and we have a crane that has been flown in, and the crane is swooping in over the trees in the middle of the Masai Mara in Africa. And it never occurred to anyone to say, is this the right expenditure of money for a network, or should we be concentrating on the correspondence? Should we be concentrating on deploying on the stories that we want to bring you as opposed to that one shot? And even the Maasai, I still remember them standing there because, of course, they're so, they have those beautiful and expressive faces, and they're going. So I think some of it has forced us to rededicate to the things that we know are at the heart of what we believe we should be doing.
Okay. At this particular
as we
point,
can.
there's a lot of an eruption of stories all over the world.
Right.
In this year, 2011, we have seen just in the first 3 months of the year, probably more than for the entire year. Do you feel that the American people are really interested in foreign news that does not include American casualties and American troops, but the Maasai, for example, or what's happening in Indonesia? Are the American people absorbed in the world?
I believe the American people are absorbed in anything new and that will make them feel smarter and will make them feel more part of a community on this globe and give them better grasp of this globe. I will believe it until the last countdown on the last broadcast I ever
and you
do.
don't-
I know it's true. I know it's true.
Okay. And do you believe that there's a, do you yourself, as anchor of World News, sort of divide up the show? I know that when there's a major story, you'll do the whole program on that one story. But on a normal day, do you divide it up, foreign, national?
No.
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 But-
No, there is no explicit or implicit quota
Okay.
of any kind. It's only the complex of what we're telling you. And are we world news tonight? Are we doing what world news does this evening? And I remember someone saying to me when I was out with Richard Nixon working on his memoirs, just remember, this is not the book, this is a book. And we know this is not the broadcast. We have tomorrow night. And this is a broadcast, and we'll be back again tomorrow night with more.
Now, if you don't look after the budget, do you look after the ratings?
I know you won't believe this. I know
I
you
don't.
won't believe it. Ratings sail into me occasionally when I see TV Newser, or ratings sail into me because someone looks very glum, but I don't check them. I don't check them myself. I don't. Because
Nobody
I
comes
just,
running in Tuesday morning and saying,
No,
hey, Diane, look at this.
I've told John Banner, our executive producer, to check them someplace else because I study his face afterwards too intently, and I can misread all sorts of things. I'd rather not. I'd rather, I mean, I get as excited as anyone when I know something that we cared about connected with an audience. I love that, but I simply don't want to be hostage to that.
What about ABC, the corporation itself?
Do they study the ratings? I assume they do. I certainly assume they do.
And they don't talk to you about it?
No, only in the most general terms, really, truly.
At the end of the year, they're not going to sit down and say, hey, Diane, if we had done this, not that, no, we could have.
No.
If you had not spent all that money going to Japan, no.
No, I do not know of a single time in my entire career when I could not cover the story I wanted, or a broadcast I was on could not cover the story they wanted because of money. Never have heard it. Never have said we can't afford to cover that story, ever.
But do you remember 30 years ago, as you were saying before, with the Derek coming into it, you could do these kinds of things without anybody questioning it because the budget was so much larger and there were fewer people watching after you on money. But there are many more people today watching after you on money. But you seem to be in the middle of the storm without it affecting you?
Well, I'm not insulated, I'm sure, because there are broadcast decisions all around me. All I'm saying is I believe if we go to the management and we say we need to cover this story, we get to cover that story.
Okay, okay.
I do. I think that, again, there are decisions probably made that don't always come to me, but you can bring them to me. And again, if we feel that this is central to what we do, we can go and say, let's do it. And we look at the way we covered the Middle East.
Yeah.
Truly, with the number of people deployed and the number of countries and the number of nights, I have no idea how much that cost. It was never asked. It was never asked and never questioned and never doubted that that's what we do.
Did you have an urge yourself when Christian Amanpour was in Egypt. I want to go there too.
I wanted to go there, but I thought, she's Christian Amanpour. and I've interviewed Mubarak, but she's interviewed him more than I have. And if anybody can get through that Tahrir Square and get to Mubarak, it's going to be
Well, she's extraordinary. It's really great.
Truly.
Let's take a quick break so that I can remind our viewing and listening audiences that this is the Kalb Report. I'm Marvin Kalb, and I'm talking with Diane Sawyer, anchor of ABC's World News. Women. Do you feel that women in the business have fully arrived? They're there, and they don't any longer feel that they have to break ceilings and all, that they've arrived?
I think that women have arrived in many ways, in many venues. I think if you look around at management, I think by and large business, the business part of what we do is not as accelerated as the on-air part of what we do. And that I always think that some of it has to do with we're on TV and you can see who's doing what. You can make your decision on the air who's doing what. I know there is a feeling, because I hear from it at some local stations, that it's still sometimes a bit of a struggle. And heaven knows around this globe, it is an inconceivable mountain that we all have to climb together, linking arms to climb together. But I think, I was looking at Judy Woodruff and thinking about those days when I wonder how many women we were when we were out on those convention floors. Not so many of us were there with those giant headsets on, running around trying to nab people. And I do believe that with every broadcast at ABC News has a female anchor in it now. And not shy female anchors in any way. And I do think that that is an achievement, and it makes a big difference. I had to do a conference once at Sun Valley, Idaho, in front of the big corporate moguls. And I called Jack Welch and I said, tell me what you have learned about putting rocket fuel behind women in the workplace. What do you really know about it? Because we see all the catalyst statistics which show that the more women you have in management, the more women you have on the board, that you have a direct correlation to the success of the company. I mean, there it is. That's a business piece of evidence you've got. And what have you learned about it? And he said, numbers. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I have learned that it's not about having women, it's about having some number of women. And I don't know what it is yet. But that if you get women in a room, including a newsroom, and you have a certain number, is it a third? Is it a third to a half? Is it more than a half? It is a different newsroom. And he said, that's what we've got to concentrate on. It is that number, not just having women, but having the number that actually controls the GPS of a great organization.
Sure, and if you look at the number of women who are now covering so many of the war zones, tsunamis, whatever it is that's happening, that is very dangerous.
Yes.
My sense watching television now is that there are more women out there than men covering the news. I don't know if that's right, and the numbers, I'm sure the foundation could provide the numbers on this. That's my impression. So there has been just extraordinary progress in that one area.
Extraordinary. And getting to go to every story. I don't think there's any hesitation anymore. You get to go to every story, and they're so good that you remember them.
No, when you were first at CBS, and you were the first female reporter anchor at 60 Minutes, what was it like then?
Oh. I had no idea what I was walking into. Let me tell you, Mike Wallace, incredible Mike Wallace. I said once, I knew I was in trouble when the entire group of the 60 Minutes correspondent walked down the hall on something really important and said, here's what we're going to do, and ended it in the men's room. And I'm standing outside thinking, well, it must be very, very useful to know what it is they're going to do next. It was, all I can say is I had a certain obliviousness because I think they were setting out, not because it necessarily was a female, but because new kids always got a bit of an initiation, right?
But 10 years later, when you went over to ABC, was it much better by that time?
Well, ABC was different because 60 Minutes, again, I had walked in as the first on-air correspondent there, and it was a lot of learning. And I have to say, it was hilarious and wonderful, too. And I like to think I gave as good as I got. I like to think that it was just like going into a circuit training course, and that by the end of it, I had muscles I didn't even know I had. But when I got to ABC, I was a co-anchor with Sam Donaldson, so going in, it was understood that we were there, and we were starting together, and it was nail-biting, and it was, as you know, it was a disaster in the beginning. I mean, we were actually a Saturday Night Live skit. Many, many, many nights. We were a skit on Saturday Night Live. We were so bad. And so
we're not that bad.
We were pretty bad, and we had to figure it. Figure it out as we went along.
Bad, you were not.
Well, then why didn't you call me and tell me how to fix it?
I want to ask. Jumping channels. I want to ask you now about social media. Mm-hmm. We've seen and discussed a lot of that, and it's played a rather major role, as a matter of fact, in the coverage of some of the stories in the Middle East. You on your program have used footage provided by people you don't know, pointing in this direction when something even more important might have been happening behind the person holding up that cell phone camera. How do you feel about using that kind of material on your show when you really don't know the origin of a lot of the stuff?
First of all, we always tell you where we got it, that we got it in, it was YouTube and we got it in through YouTube.
I know, but if you say I got it from YouTube, that doesn't mean you know.
I understand that, but I do think that our viewers do know the different frames of pedigree that you have on footage like that. We do also call and do our very best to verify everything that we're putting on the air, and there have been many things that might have been electrifying television we do not put on the air because we cannot verify that it's a true representation of what was happening at that moment.
Because it is a question when you get into something that is so fast-moving and you pick up footage because you don't have your own people there. The tendency on television is to show something. And if you have something, it seems to me that the temptation sometimes would be to use it even without that extra check, though I'm sure you do provide that.
We really do try, and we really do. We try to be as judicious as we can when we are looking at something that is not a lot of people singing American Idol, which is a different kind of standard.
Right, sure.
But we try to be as careful as we can because we have seen it, and we have seen it in situations where we never want to change the story based on something we don't know as much about as we can.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know whether you recently saw Brent Scowcroft on the air on some program talking about the power of this new means of communication in terms of fashioning a new political outcome, or attempting to, throughout the Middle East. And that new communications revolution has had more to do with the changes in the Middle East than anything else Brent Scowcroft said. And I'm wondering, from your vantage point as anchor, do you share that view?
Oh, it's impossible not to see. It is impossible not to see and be stunned by the immediate pilot light of hope that goes on when people are hearing from people who are connected to them and who are going to stay online with them. And when those first signals start coming out and somebody is responding and you know there is a voice there and that voice is hearing you, It is impossible not to believe it. It's a whole new force in the world. And Mark Zuckerberg, whom I interviewed, always said this will be this was before the recent round of democracy fever, as they have called it, but he said this will be a giant force for democracy. You can pummel me all you want, and you can hammer me all you want for believing that we have to go big, bold, and broad rather than being driven by such privacy, and he would argue he has privacy constraints, but being driven by such considerations of privacy about do you have to unfriend somebody to send them that thing, that he would take his chance unfriending the world and seeing what the world has to say. And I have to say, he believed it. He absolutely believed that this would happen.
Well, that's fascinating. In this whole new world of communication, there is Fox News. I was just wondering what you thought of Fox News.
You know, I watch Fox News. I watch Fox News. I watch MSNBC, too. I watch CNN. I am going to be in rehab for serial news watching someday. I'll have to go to some Betty Ford wing someday and cure myself. But I think that, again, I think you can learn so much from the excitement of the people on Fox News about what they're telling you and about what they are bringing to every story. And I think the American people are enormously smart, and they are enormously, collectively, so discerning about making their own judgments as they move from MSNBC, as they move to Fox News as well. And I just don't think ideas can be labeled with the people who hold them on any spectrum. I think people can make their mind up about ideas. And I do think that the people who hear something are surrounded by a lot of information and can check it in a lot of ways we couldn't even check things before.
Diane,
so I am not going to, I am a full, I'm not kidding, I am a universal watcher, and I learn.
It is a noble sentiment on your part, and I applaud it completely.
Do you not watch?
I watch it all the time. I get up in the morning, go to bed. I'm in Fox.
Right, right.
No, I'm just kidding. Right. What I'm getting at is not really so much Fox News as it is opinion in the world of news. And that you have a stunningly upbeat...
But don't you think people know when they're getting opinion in the world of news?
And getting news and making the distinction between the two?
I think they know. And I think people like to be challenged. And just as you like to be challenged by someone at a dinner table who has a contrary opinion, you like to say, I couldn't disagree with you more. I can't believe you said that. And that's also, as Socrates might have said, that's how we learn too.
That is how we learn. There's no question about that. I'm talking about the world of news, where you were raised and where you have been at a very high pinnacle for a long time. In the world of news, people might like to believe, Neanderthals though we are, that the news is where you get information, not opinion. And we are now in a world where there is so much more opinion, it seems, than straight hard news. And no matter how gloriously intelligent every person is, it may be difficult on occasion to distinguish one from the other. I'm listening to you say the American people will make that distinction.
I believe they do. And I believe I don't know about news. I think facts are still the currency of what you and I want to deal in. And we know that we have to bring to the facts that we seek out every day the same degree of passion and enthusiasm. And you don't know this, but I cannot wait to tell you this, that we see in opinion journalism. I see it, I know how Pollyanna this may sound to you, but I see it as a way for us to strengthen how much we believe in the fact that will anchor your opinion and keep introducing those, and that we are not subsumed by opinion journalism. We're not.
I hope you are right. I really do. I hope you are right. What are your sources of information?
You mean where do I look every day?
Where do you learn things from?
I don't know where to begin. I at least read much of about 6 papers in the morning. I watch Good Morning America on my TiVo because I get to sleep late. I don't have to get up at 3:45 in the morning anymore, which I did for 11 years. Every time I see that up there, I drop off again. I get into the office, and of course, we're scanning the emails that are coming in from our team around the world, and they are fantastic. I wish we could simply introduce you sometimes to the debates that go on at ABC News between Terry Moran and Jake Tapper. That alone is worth stopping everything you're doing to see how they're contending over what has happened during the day. I of course read the Daily Beast, and I read HuffPost, and I read Drudge, and I stay all day long. I can see a complete quilt of screens up on the air, and I can see what's going on, and we click in and out all during the day.
Do you have a favorite website? A place where you feel you must go to every day? I mean, you mentioned the Daily Beast. I'm wondering if that's it.
Yeah, I check in with each of them. Of course, the New York Times website throughout the day too, and the Washington Post website, and LA Times. And before I go to bed at night, I check in those 3 just to make sure there's nothing I missed.
Wow. Do you eat during the course of the day also?
Do I what?
Do you eat during the
Copiously.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about ethics in journalism. The WikiLeaks story. If you were Bill Keller, the editor of the New York Times, and you had the chance to get hundreds and possibly thousands of interesting, even fascinating, but top secret cables from the US government, what would you do? Would you do what Keller did and put them on the air?
Well, each of us has our own star we steer by. We reported on them, and we reported on the content of them, which, again, I want to say is a way of putting them on the air. So, of course, we did put them on the air.
Yes, but that was after the New York Times had first broken the story.
Yes, but if they had come to them, I'd like to think that we would have made a reasoned decision, and that we would have done what Bill did, that we would have been deliberate about it. I remember, is it William Sloane Coffin who said once that he most trusts sad revolutionaries, and that you have to somewhat live in the contradiction in these moments in journalism, as you know, and if you are reluctant, if you are like Plato, the philosopher king dragged out of the cave, if you are duly reluctant to do anything that might even inadvertently compromise a life because you don't know who's being exposed, then that is your beginning. And I assume that they did everything
they did due diligence, no
absolutely could. Then you just have to make your individual news organization decision about how much time you have and what the proportion is of the time you have to spend on the content. There was a lot of it that was, and you and I know this because we know that a lot of those guys around the world, the one guy, his one moment of fame is writing that cable that suddenly shows up in WikiLeaks. And I'm sure he assumed nobody had even read his cable a lot of the time. So I think that what we learned from them and what we would have broadcast from them would have been what we thought truly illuminated the world. But because we are in what is the proportion of what we do, it probably would have been less by virtue of that.
Now, Bill, who was sitting in the same chair not too long ago, argued that he did it because it was news. And after due diligence, he felt that, however embarrassing it might have been to the US government, it was news, and he wanted to run with it, and he did it, and he's not sorry about that. Do you buy into that? Do you accept that rationale?
Do I accept his reasoning
Yeah.
for him? Yeah, I do.
Does that mean that almost anything after due diligence is publishable or broadcastable?
No, and we don't know where the no is.
What do you think it is?
Because we do make decisions. We do make decisions about some forms of criminal brutality. We make decisions that they are not broadcastable by our particular show. It's not that, again, I think we have to watch out for universals. We are in the business, I hope, of looking at the constellation of the question presented to us every time. And if I thought there were a universal standard you could apply to everything, I'm not sure I would know how to behave as a reporter. But we do make judgments about what encourages, at times, what encourages copycat criminal behavior. We make those judgments.
Right, and I think what I'm trying to get at also was it's not only universal values, but there are national interests that are involved. And I'm wondering whether you think that an anchor, because the anchor does have a series of special responsibilities that are broadcast, that the anchor also has a responsibility to the national interest of the country. Does that run through your mind also?
Oh, yes, of course. Of course.
But to the point of saying that because of that, I'm not going to run those cables. No. They were put out there basically to embarrass the United States, and I don't want to participate in it.
Would you have run the Pentagon Papers?
Different story.
Would you have done it?
Absolutely.
Because?
The Pentagon Papers was released to the public by one person angry at one war that he thought was unjust. Julian Assange appears to have a broader mandate in mind. He has said he is there to embarrass, to bring down, to illuminate, all kinds of things. Is Assange a journalist? Is he like Diane Sawyer and entitled to all of the privileges of a journalist?
Does someone have to be a certified journalist before you will accept the information they bring you?
No. But wait a minute, I'm interviewing you.
And if they
wait a minute. I tell you what, let's go to another subject. In the 1970s, when you worked for President Nixon, you were both in the White House, then you followed him out to California.
Right.
Those were extraordinary times, and you had a great seat on history as it was unfolding right in front of you. But I do have this question. Please help me understand your continuing loyalty to a president who had embarrassed the country, had lied to the American people, gave birth to the Watergate scandal. Help me out.
Well, you know, it wasn't even just about that. It was, in a funny way, how I lived up to what my father had always taught me, which is if you walk away from someone at the worst time of their life, that is also a choice. That has implications for who you are and who you want to be. And I had been there to go to China with your brother. And I had been there through all of the times that the end of the signing of the Treaty of the Vietnam War. And I had been there through those times, and there were a handful of us who were asked to go. And I was asked to go for a very specific reason, which is mysteriously, because I got up and read everything in the morning, I had read so many things that for the first round, one of the lawyers said to me, you can tell us if what we're saying is not true or not based at least on what the reporting has been. So go out as that kind of traffic light on what we're saying and not saying. And for me to say no in that moment was for me to assume that I had some, I guess, personal sanctimony that I don't have. I do believe that people can redeem themselves. I saw what was done. I saw it, and I saw it on the inside, and we all know what a ghastly bruise that was. But I was one person asked by one other person in the worst moment for them. And I don't know. I just wouldn't have known how to say no.
I understand. And obviously there was another answer. You could have said no.
I could have said no, and I did think I was going out for a few months, and as my mother always pointed out, you went out 28 and came back 32. So I didn't know what was going to happen at each stage and the choices that were made to stay and do it. I could have said no, but there were people who resigned, as we know. There were people who resigned and wrote books and wrote letters, and I will never do that. I just won't.
You know that President Nixon had an enemies list.
Yes.
And I know it because I was on it. But, for example, I mean, would you have known about an enemies list at the time?
No.
No, that was not
No.
part of your world. How difficult was it for you to make the journey from political partisanship to objective journalism? Because you have done that quite well.
Well, you know, even though my father was in Republican politics in Kentucky, which not many people were, I believe it or not, I didn't go to the White House as a partisan. I really didn't. I went because I'd been a weather girl. And I had been a really bad weather girl. You can't talk me out of this one. I was a bad weather girl. And my father died, and I was with my mother for a year at home, and she asked me if I would go and do something else because she felt that I was staying there for her. And I began to look at other things I kind of wanted to do. And truly, I looked around and thought, well, working in a White House, that might be interesting. And I came to Washington. I interviewed with the news divisions at the same time and was rejected. And ended up at the White House because I thought it would be interesting. To me, it wasn't one president or the other. It was to learn what that crucible could possibly be like.
If you had one more interview to do as a pro, who would it be with?
I think the Pope.
Good.
Don't you think the Pope?
Yeah. I would have liked the other Pope, John the 23rd.
John, yeah.
John the 23rd.
But this Pope would be
John
very...
Paul II.
This Pope
This
would be
one's
very interesting too in his
Have you tried to get
academic. We have written letters, and we have written. I suspect I won't. I suspect I'm not at the top of his list.
Got about a minute and a half left. What is your sense of the future of American journalism? Up, down?
Me? Oh.
Big time.
I think every one of these students in this room, I swear, is going to go out and change the world through American journalism.
Really?
You are going to do it. I know.
Spell that out a little bit. Spell it out a little bit.
I think we simply don't begin to know the enormous power of passion delivered in all of these different fora, online and off. I think we don't begin to know what it's going to be like when we are connected globally in a way that we've never been collected before, and that we see that what we say here on the air is going to make a difference and help those women who are dying of maternal mortality in Afghanistan if we simply believe we can do it. Because I think we have not yet experienced what it is to stand arm in arm as journalists on facts that we know can be the lever on which you can simply move the globe.
Diane, we are out of time. I am very unhappy to acknowledge that. Let me first thank our wonderful audience, including the International Women's Media Foundation, all of you here. To the many people all over the country and the world who watch the Kalb Report, to those of you out there who still cherish the role of a free press in stimulating a free society, and finally, my thanks to the incomparable Diane Sawyer, A Life in News. Bless you. Thank you so much. I'm Marvin Kalb, saying what Ed Murrow used to say, good night and good luck.